8 months after buying my first house, I learned something I'll never forget. Your home doesn't feel like yours anymore the moment you realize you're not the only one inside it. I didn't hear a break-in. I didn't hear footsteps upstairs. I just walked down into my basement and saw a stranger staring back at me from the shadows. I was 24, fresh out of college, and trying to convince myself I had life figured out. The job was stable. The house was a milestone. And for a while I actually felt proud of how normal everything seemed. The only weird part of the home was the basement. It was massive, unfinished, and partitioned into separate rooms with plywood walls and exposed framing, like the previous owners had tried to build a maze underground. There was the main area at the bottom of the stairs, then the laundry section, then what looked like a workshop, and then this back room that felt wrong just because it existed. You couldn't see the entire basement from any one spot. Every corner was a blind spot. Every wall created another pocket of darkness. I barely went down there. Laundry was the only time. That night was a weeknight. Late, quiet, normal. I opened the basement door with a laundry basket on my hip and froze for a second because the lights were already on. I told myself I forgot them last time. It made sense. I didn't even hesitate. I started down the stairs. The basement air hit me like it always did, stale and colder than the rest of the house. Even with the lights on, the place felt dim because I never bothered replacing the old yellow bulbs. Everything down there looked sickly, like it wasn't meant to be seen. I stepped onto the basement floor and headed toward the laundry area. That's when I caught movement on my left. I turned my head instinctively, and I locked eyes with a man crouched behind a folding table in the far corner. My brain refused to understand it at first. It took a full second for reality to land, and when it did, my stomach dropped so hard it felt like I'd missed a step. There was a stranger hiding in my basement. He looked filthy, like he'd been sleeping outside, or worse, like he'd been sleeping down there. His eyes weren't wide with surprise, they were calm, like he'd already decided what he was going to do. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he stood up and ran. Not toward me, deeper into the basement, into the maze of plywood rooms that broke my paralysis instantly. I staggered backward toward the stairs, refusing to take my eyes off the darkness where he disappeared. But I moved slow, because before I could reach the steps, every light in the basement shut off. The darkness wasn't just dark, it was complete. I had never been down there with the lights off before, and I hadn't realized how deep that darkness really was. It swallowed everything instantly: walls, floor, staircase, my own hands. It felt like the basement had erased itself. I kept moving anyway, thinking I knew my house well enough to find the stairs. I was wrong. I tripped and slammed to the ground hard enough to knock the air out of my chest. The basket flew out of my hands, clothes scattered somewhere into the black. When I pushed myself up, disoriented and shaking, I realized my phone was upstairs. No flashlight, no help. So I did the stupidest thing possible. I screamed. I screamed like an animal, like something was ripping me apart, because I thought maybe if I sounded insane enough the intruder would run away. But the moment I stopped, I heard screaming from the other side of the basement. Not panic screaming. It was worse. It sounded confident, angry, like a person who wasn't scared of being caught. And in that moment, I understood something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't trapped down there with me. I was trapped down there with him. I stopped screaming, and he stopped too. And then I heard movement behind me. Soft footsteps, shifting, slow, patient repositioning, like he was tracking me by sound in the dark. I moved forward using my hands, feeling along surfaces, table edges, plywood walls, stacked boxes, trying to find a staircase by touch. The basement felt endless. Then I heard breathing behind me, close, wet and heavy, like he was right there. I moved faster, barely holding back panic, and finally my hand hit something solid and familiar. Wood, the base of the staircase. Relief hit me like a drug. I grabbed the railing and bolted upward. taking the steps two at a time. And that's when something wrapped around my ankle. I lost my grip instantly. My head slammed against the railing, and I fell all the way down the stairs again, hitting the basement floor with a sound I'll never forget. Before I could even understand what happened, I felt myself being dragged. My ankle was locked in someone's grip, and I was being pulled away from the stairs with terrifying strength. I kicked wildly, desperate, and my foot connected with something solid. A grunt. His grip loosened. I twisted hard and ripped my leg free, crawling in the dark like my life depended on it. Because it did. He screamed again behind me. I found the stairs and ran up without thinking, bursting into the kitchen and slamming the basement door shut behind me. The only problem was that door didn't have a lock, so I pressed my whole body against it, shaking, bracing it like a barricade. Seconds later, footsteps thundered up the basement stairs, and the door exploded inward as he slammed into it. I screamed again, not from fear this time, pure survival, pushing back with everything I had. The door opened for half a second, just enough for me to feel the pressure of him trying to force his way through. He hit it again, and again. Each slam made the wood creak like it was about to give up. I ripped off my socks so I wouldn't slip on the kitchen floor and pushed harder, legs burning, arms trembling. And then, silence. I held my breath, waiting for another impact. Instead, I heard footsteps running back down the basement stairs. I didn't waste the chance. I grabbed my phone off the counter with shaking hands and called the police, still holding the door shut with my back. When the police arrived, the intruder was gone. They found a basement window forced open from the outside. Nothing stolen, nothing missing. And that was the part that made the officer's next words feel like a knife in my chest. He said the guy probably wasn't there to rob me. He was probably living down there, because he knew where the basement light switch was, and it wasn't in an obvious place, meaning he didn't find it that night. He'd already known. I moved out for months later, and I still think about that night sometimes, usually when my house is quiet and the lights are off, because I know, with absolute certainty, that man wasn't hiding in my basement for my stuff. He was hiding there for me. The first time it happened, I was 14. It was a Tuesday, one of those dreary, rain-soaked afternoons where the sky looked like a giant gray blanket. My parents were both at work, not due back for hours, which meant I had the house all to myself. Perfect for a marathon session of my favorite video game. I was sprawled on the living room floor, controller in hand, completely absorbed in the digital world on the screen. The only sounds were the game's epic soundtrack and the steady patter of rain against the windows. That's when I heard it, a faint tap, tap, tap. It was so soft I almost missed it. I paused the game, straining my ears. The house fell silent, except for the rain. Maybe it was just a branch hitting the side of the house, I thought. The wind was picking up. I shrugged it off and unpaused, diving back into my game. A few minutes later, it came again. Tap, tap, tap. This time, it was a little louder, a little more distinct. It wasn't random like a branch in the wind. It was rhythmic, deliberate. My heart started to beat a little faster. I muted the TV. The silence that followed was heavy, almost suffocating. I sat perfectly still, listening. Tap, tap, tap. It was coming from below me, from the basement. Our basement was an old, unfinished space. Concrete floors, bare wooden beams, and a single, flickering fluorescent light that never seemed to work right. It was creepy on a good day, and we usually only went down there to do laundry or grab something from storage. There was no reason for anyone to be down there. My mind raced through the possibilities. A raccoon, a stray cat that somehow got in. But the tapping, it sounded too methodical for an animal. I slowly got to my feet, my palms suddenly sweaty. I tiptoed to the basement door, which was just off the kitchen. My hand hovered over the cold brass knob. I took a deep breath and pressed my ear against the wood. Silence, and then a faint shuffle. like the sound of a shoe dragging on concrete. My blood ran cold. It wasn't an animal. There was someone in my basement. My breath hitched in my throat, and I backed away from the door as quietly as I could. The house, which had felt like my personal kingdom just minutes ago, now felt like a trap. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind against the house sounded menacing. I scrambled to find my phone, my fingers fumbling as I swiped to unlock it. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. I called my mom. Please pick up, please pick up, please pick up. Voicemail? Of course. I hung up and immediately dialed my dad. It rang once, twice, 3 times. I was about to give up when his voice finally came through the speaker. Hey, bud. I'm a little busy. Can I call you back? His voice was casual, normal. It felt like it was from another universe. Dad, I whispered, my voice trembling. Dad, there's someone in the house. I think they're in the basement. There was a pause on the other end of the line. The casual tone was gone. What? Leo, what are you talking about? Are you sure? Yes, I heard them tapping, and then I heard them moving around. I could hear shuffling and muffled voices on his end. He was talking to someone, probably a coworker. Okay, listen to me, he said, his voice now sharp and focused. Go to your room right now. Lock the door and hide in your closet. Do not make a sound. I'm calling the police, and I'm on my way. I'll be there as fast as I can. Do you understand? Yes. I managed to squeak out. Go, now. He hung up. I didn't waste a second. I bolted up the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. The sound of my own frantic footsteps seemed deafening. I slammed my bedroom door shut and twisted the lock. My closet was my only option. I squeezed into the small space, pulling coats and shirts around me until I was completely hidden in the darkness. My heart was pounding against my ribs like a drum. I tried to control my breathing, terrified that whoever was downstairs would hear me. Minutes stretched into an eternity. All I could hear was the frantic thumping of my own heart and the muffled sound of the rain. And then a new sound. A loud thud from downstairs. It was the basement door. Then another. Thud. 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 They were trying to get out. They weren't trying to be quiet anymore. They knew I was here. Panic seized me. The flimsy wooden door to the basement wouldn't hold for long. I imagined the lock splintering, the door flying open. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying for the sound of sirens. The banging became more frantic, more violent. Crack. I flinched, picturing the wood splitting. Each impact sent a fresh wave of terror through me. Who was this person? What did they want? The house didn't feel safe anymore. My bedroom didn't feel safe. Even my own skin felt like a cage. And then, just as suddenly as it started, the banging stopped. The silence that followed was even more terrifying. What happened? Did they give up? Did they find another way out? Or were they listening, waiting? I held my breath, straining to hear anything over the pounding in my ears. I stayed huddled in that closet, wrapped in darkness and fear, for what felt like a lifetime. Eventually, I heard it. The beautiful, beautiful sound of police sirens wailing in the distance, getting closer and closer. Relief washed over me so intensely my legs felt weak. I heard car doors slam outside, followed by loud, authoritative voices. This is the police. Come out with your hands up. I stayed put, just like my dad told me to. A few minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was my dad. Leo, are you okay? The police are there. Stay where you are. I'm almost home. His voice was shaky. Soon, I heard heavy footsteps coming up the stairs and a firm knock on my bedroom door. Leo, it's the police. Son, your dad's here. You can come out. I cautiously unlocked the door and peeked out. 2 officers stood in the hallway, their faces grim. And behind them was my dad, his face pale, his eyes wide with fear and relief. He rushed forward and pulled me into the tightest hug I've ever had. We went downstairs together. The house was swarming with officers. One of them was talking to my mom on the phone, who was sobbing. They were examining the basement door. The wood around the knob was splintered and cracked. The lock was barely holding on. A few more hits and it would have been torn clean off the frame. The officers cleared the basement. It was empty. The window, a small, high pane of glass, was broken. That's how they got in. And that's how they got out when they heard the sirens. They must have panicked and fled. The relief was immense, but it was short-lived. As my mom arrived, rushing in to hug me, one of the officers came up from the kitchen. He had a strange look on his face. He asked my mom, "Mom, do you keep your knives in a block on the counter?" My mom nodded, confused. "Yes, why?" The officer's voice was grave. "We were just doing a sweep of the main floor. You might want to check it. The large carving knife, the biggest one. It's missing." We all just stared at him. The blood drained from my face. The intruder hadn't just been trapped in the basement, they had been in our kitchen first. They had armed themselves, and they were still out there, somewhere, with our knife. I never felt truly safe in that house again. Every creak, every tap, every shadow sent a shiver down my spine, reminding me of the day the outside world broke in. I thought the noises in my basement were my cat. Soft rustling, little thuds. The kind of sounds that mean nothing when you're used to them. But then I heard scratching at the door at the top of the basement stairs. And I realized my cat wasn't down there with me, which meant something else was. I was 16, and the basement was basically my territory. My parents used the living room upstairs like it was the only room in the house, so the finished basement became my hangout spot, sectional couch, decent TV, storage rooms in the back filled with boxes nobody ever touched unless it was holiday season. And every night, my parents would put our cat Rocky down there before bed because he was needy and loud and obsessed with attention. That was normal, routine. That's why I didn't hesitate when I invited a girl over one Friday night. Her name was Meline, and I snuck her in through the basement's interior garage door, the one convenience feature my parents never suspected I treated like a private entrance. We were sitting on the couch pretending to watch TV, doing that awkward teenage thing where neither of us wanted to admit we were nervous. That's when I heard it, a faint rustling from one of the storage rooms in the back. It was subtle at first, like something shifting inside a box. Then a soft thud, like a tote lid being nudged. Nothing crazy, nothing that screamed danger. I barely even looked up. "That's just Rocky," I said casually, even though I hadn't actually seen him yet. Meline still tensed a little, her shoulders rising, but I kept my voice calm. I told her my cat was an energetic little menace, always climbing on things. And to be fair, that was true. So, we tried to relax again. But the noises didn't stop. Every few minutes, there'd be another rustle, a small bump, a slow scrape, like something dragging lightly across cardboard. Each time, Meline would glance toward the dark back area, and I'd give her a reassuring look like I had everything under control. I didn't. I was just as stubborn to admit I was getting uneasy. Then I heard something that instantly drained the heat out of my body. Scratching, not from the storage rooms, from the door at the top of the basement stairs. A familiar, impatient scratch like a tiny creature trying to be let in. I knew that sound. It was Rocky, which meant he wasn't in the basement. He was upstairs. I didn't say anything right away. I just stared at the door, listening, and felt a cold line of dread form in my chest, because now I had a problem I couldn't explain away. If Rocky was upstairs, then what had been moving around in the storage room behind us for the past 30 minutes? Before I could even decide what to do, Meline screamed. It wasn't a small gasp or a nervous yelp. She screamed like someone had grabbed her. Her whole body snapped stiff, and she pointed past me toward the back of the basement, eyes wide and wet with panic. I turned, and for a second, I didn't understand what I was looking at. A foam football, one of those soft kid ones, bright and harmless, rolled slowly across the basement floor. It didn't fall. It didn't bounce. It rolled like it had been pushed, like it had been thrown. Straight out from the storage room, everything in me froze. My brain went empty and loud at the same time, because there was only one way that football could have moved like that. Someone was back there. Someone had been back there the entire time, watching, listening, waiting. I grabbed Melanie's arm so hard I felt her flinch, and I pulled her toward the stairs. We sprinted up without looking back, tripping over our own feet, slamming the basement door behind us once we hit the main floor. I kept Rocky out, even though he was yowling and pawing at my legs. My parents came running, confused at first then terrified once they saw our faces. The police were called immediately. While we waited, I stood on the back deck staring at the garage, because the basement connected directly to it. If the intruder tried to escape through the garage, I'd see them. There was only one path out, and I had my eyes locked on it. The cops showed up fast and searched the basement top to bottom. Storage rooms, garage, windows, corners, everything. They found no one. No signs of forced entry, and every basement window was locked from the inside. One officer suggested the intruder must have slipped out through the garage before they arrived, but I know that didn't happen, because I was watching. I would have seen them, and that's what still messes with me, not the scream, not the football, not even the noises. It's the part that makes no sense, because if nobody got out, then the only other possibility is the one my brain refuses to hold onto for too long, that whatever was back in that storage room wasn't looking for a way out. It already had one.